This morning's topic is God present even there where there is ignorance? The answer is yes. The scriptures of the East, of India, the Bible agree. God made all things. There is only God. And without him was nothing made that was made. Everything is made of God's light. And it is our duty, it's our purpose, it's our reason for being born into this world to lift our consciousness to that level where we can perceive God's light. That's our only job, is to become able to perceive, to lift our consciousness up so that we can perceive that light, commune with that light, and become one with that light. It's not so hard to make the leap of reason that that light exists. We know intellectually, even science tells us the material world is really energy, and that energy is really thought. That thought is consciousness. Even scientists are saying now that the universe looks as though it's made of consciousness, which the rishis have been saying for thousands and thousands of years. There are levels of reality that we are aware of, that we take for granted, that we can't perceive with our five senses. If you have a dog, you know that he or she hears things that you can't hear. Their range of hearing is much, much greater than ours. We know there are color spectrums that we don't see. There are radio waves, television waves that we aren't aware of, but we know they exist. We can tune into that television anytime, and maybe we tune into it a little too often. But these realities help us to understand that there is so much more, and we can find it. We can live on those higher levels. This chant that Dharmadas just sang, Swami Ramtirtha's song, is a very fierce song. It's a very powerful kshatriya warrior kind of chant, and we love it for that reason. And that is what it takes. That kind of power, energy, commitment, and confidence. It takes that to lift our consciousness up by the bootstraps and say, I want spirit. I want divine joy. I don't want to live in pain and fear. I don't want to be the darkness who can't comprehend the light. I want to know that light. I want to open to that light. I want to be one with that light. That's where the joy is. That's where the pain-free state, that's where the divine love is. And moreover, that's where we can start to give back to life. If we spend our lives in our consciousness thinking about just me, the money I'm going to get, the food I'm going to eat, the house I'm going to have, and the car I'm going to drive, and how big my television screen is going to be, is that happy? We end up with nothing at the end of our lives. We may know the entire saga of Game of Thrones from the very beginning, and that we've got that in our minds, but is that what we really want to leave this world with? Do we want to have helped people? Do we want to have loved people? Do we want to have given our hearts, our love? I think that's probably a better choice. We always hear, when I read about life after death, the being of light comes and says, so how much have you loved? Not how many toys did you collect? So we want to give that energy. We want to be able to help and ease the suffering of other people. That's the real job in life, to lift our consciousness so that we can give God to other people. And the way we do that, the way we pull our consciousness up by our bootstraps, is we develop consciously and with our willpower, we develop those attitudes of mind that are like the tools in our tool belt, or the weapons of the warrior of light. And those attitudes, which is so perfect that the affirmation happiness was connected with this reading, because that attitude of happiness is essential. We have to learn to be happy under all circumstances. I've told some of you this little cartoon before, but I just love it. There's two devils standing there with their pitchforks in hell, and they're watching this guy with this little wheelbarrow full of flaming rocks or whatever, and he's bustling along with his little wheelbarrow, and he's whistling and with energy and with joy. And these devils say to each other, we're just not getting to this guy. No matter where you find yourself, keep that attitude of joy. Keep your mind focused here. Keep that thought of, even though this person who is yelling in my face, and it's extremely unpleasant, God is in him. And I'm not going to get upset, and I'm not going to be afraid. And I'm going to love the God that is in him. It's not easy. It takes practice. It takes commitment. It takes willpower. It takes a heart that wants to know more, to say, I'm not going to give into the fear that World War III is going to happen and all hell is going to break loose, and I'm not going to go there. I'm going to live in my center, and I'm going to trust in God to give me what is right for me and help me in every way to grow towards him. No matter what happens, no matter the circumstances. Dharmadas will tell you the story now of who we visited yesterday. We went to, I didn't get to go in this time because I didn't finish my paperwork in time, but we visited a prisoner in the Coalinga prison. And it reminded me of how anything can happen in this world. But if we hold firm to God's hand, no pain, no fear, no suffering can touch us. And we can be a light in this world, no matter where we are. God bless you. I'll put it up there.
So one of the things that you can do when you go to a prison, or at least this particular one, is you can have a picture taken. And so I thought I would bring a little show and tell. This is Jai Ram as his spiritual name, and Joe Hunt is his given name. He's a Kriyaban and has been for many years. And I'll put it on the altar, and you can all see it later if you like. NIrmala will put it on the altar. It's an interesting, I want to add my testimony to those who have gone before me, including NIrmala, answering the question, is God present even there where there is ignorance? I can safely say that there's a little bit of ignorance in a prison. And I can also say that there is God's presence there, because it was a powerful experience. And this is a very unusual soul, Jai Ram, and we've corresponded some in the last few months, and I've been aware of his story. Swami even wrote a paragraph or two in one of his books about Jai Ram's situation, his story. It's actually published in one of Swami's books. I think it's Hope for a Better World. I'll have to look again. But strange things happen in this world. And I was reminded, in fact, I even told him yesterday, there's one line, if you have the copy of Autobiography of a Yogi that with the blue cover, it's on page 61. Yogananda is meeting the levitating saint. And the levitating saint, we visited his home in Calcutta, which is right near where Yogananda grew up. And he had an odd characteristic, which is that he never came outside, except on very special festival days. He would come out as far as the front sidewalk. That's as far outside of the house as he would go. And then he would go back inside when the festival was over, and that was it. And otherwise, he did not come outside. Now, that's unusual. I mean, most people walk, they do something, they come outside. And Yogananda asked him about this when he was a boy and the saint was a man. And the saint said to him, this is very interesting, he said, God plants his saints sometimes in unexpected soil, lest we reduce him to a rule, lest we think we can reduce him to a rule. And it's intriguing to me on several levels that he said that. For one reason, that he actually was willing to identify himself as a saint. That in itself is unusual, although in India that term has a little more flexible application or understanding. A saint is someone who is deeply devoted, 100% committed to God. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're fully realized, but that commitment is considered the front door to sainthood, sanctity. But it also just intrigued me because I didn't go, when you go to visit someone, you may think, I know I have sometimes thought, if we visit people in the hospital, I sometimes think we should just rent some rooms in hospitals. It's just like, there's just this sort of regular flow in and out of emergency rooms and hospitals. When we lived in India and Swami was in and out of the hospital for a while, we just thought, let's just take a room here, then we don't have to keep moving all the stuff over, and then we at least know it's this room, and we can put some plants in there, and we can get the mosquitoes out, and etc. Anyway, but there can be this tendency to think, okay, I am going to help this person. I am going to give love to this person, and that's a beautiful thought. And I want to echo what NIrmala was saying about we have to be instruments for that love. But in this case, I also felt on a certain level that I was visiting a saint. And for us in the West, that may seem very unexpected. How could a saint allow himself to be in that situation if he's truly a saint? All I know is that I was very uplifted. And all I know is that Asha and Jyotish and Devi and Ananta and Maria and others who have gone to visit him have also spoken similarly. And so it's a very unusual situation that he's in. But he has managed to practice Kriya. This chant that I was singing, I don't know if it made any of you uncomfortable. I know the first time I heard it, it's a little shocking. It's sort of like, whoa, either this is the most massively unbelievable ego speaking, or it's God's, the God's eye view of the world speaking to us. And I had an interesting, Jairam told a number of stories yesterday that were fascinating, and in some cases humorous, in other cases deeply inspiring. And one of them was a little bit offhanded, but he was describing how he had learned energization, the energization exercises that Yogananda developed, and he was practicing meditation, except that the place he had to practice meditation was in a room with 30 other men and a television set blasting in the center of the room, and multiple conversations going on, competing with the television set that was blasting at full volume. And he said to me, and he said to himself, if I let circumstances dictate whether I will or will not practice, I will end up never practicing, because the circumstances will never align in such a way that I can do this. And so he would walk out, and now this is why I mentioned the chant, is because, we tend to think, I sort of tended to think, none can atone me, say who would injure me, and, the world turns aside. I mean, all this, bold language. Visualize yourself for a moment in a room with 32 bunk beds, and all around the outside of the room. And it's not a very big room, it's just a lot of men in one room. Visualize walking to the center of that room and going, and he said, this was very cute, he said, and I didn't really have the exercises very perfectly down, so when it came to the hip recharging, where you do leg circles with the arm, I thought I was supposed to lift my leg way up in the air, so I was doing this sort of exaggerated, ridiculous motion, which made it even more, humorous for people and just completely bizarre. And he would sit and meditate after he did the exercises on his bunk. He would sit cross-legged and he would meditate. In the middle of all this commotion and chaos, and you might say thwarting cross currents of ego. And I don't know, for me that is just deeply inspiring, that somebody could be that committed to just ignore whatever anybody else is saying or thinking or feeling, stay true to the path that he saw in front of him, and to try to follow that in whatever situation he found himself in. We, all of us, have lived in a prison. This is actually something I said to him as well. In fact, the scary part is that most people in this world are living in prison right now. The prison is the outside of their body. The prison is as large as their skin. And, if you think of being claustrophobic, being confined in a small space, this creepy feeling, that's a really small prison. I mean, solitary confinement is huge compared to the size of your body. Freedom is found by going inside and not being limited by the body and the consciousness. We are tasked with having a spiritual experience in a human body. Nirmala was saying, our destiny is to know God. Our destiny is to, and our mission in life is to be an instrument for light, an instrument for love. We can only do that if we learn to serve the light and if we learn to receive it in our lives. We have to actually gather, we have to turn and face that light. The light shines in darkness, but very few people are looking for it. That's the interesting thing. Most people are busy with these two eyes looking around the world for an outward fulfillment, but the light is inside, and we see it through a single eye. The Bible even says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body will be filled with light. Now that's not a passage that is easily capable of being explained. If thine eye be single? I mean, in various translations it gets kind of morphed into, if your eyes are good, your health will be good. I mean, it turns into, bran mash. It's sort of, there's no substance in it. If thine eye be single, if you will focus single-heartedly on the divine, you will find the divine within you with tremendous power and blessing. And I was also reflecting on the simple phrase, and this came from an experience that I had the night before going to visit Jairam. Friday night, we spent down in Kolinga, just nearby, so it's a 3+ hour drive down there, and I didn't want to do that on Saturday morning and then spend hours with him and then turn around and drive all the way back again. It would make for a crazy day. I had this experience. We've all heard the phrase in the Bible, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And there's a tendency to think, okay, well, that means that if somebody does something wrong, if I do something wrong, oh boy, God will dole out the punishment. It'll come big time. Well, okay, there is a validity to that point of view, but there's much more to it. Vengeance is mine also means when you open your heart to God, the sweetest and the softest and the subtlest blessing comes to you. And every time you've suffered in your life in some way, due to circumstances, due to whatever, especially when it seems unjustified, something comes back around the other side, and it satisfies our hearts. And does it come on a schedule that we can predict? Not necessarily, no. But does it come? Absolutely, it comes. And the more we learn to look inside, to find the fulfillment, just as this beautiful affirmation was speaking about being happy under every circumstance, when we make that commitment, and it takes a commitment, behind the software code that can create a chant like Swami Ram Tirtha's song, behind that code is a deep, deep commitment to learn, to love, to give, to dive into our own experience deeply and share that experience with others. But when we do make that commitment, life does two things. Alternately, it throws a whole bunch of roadblocks in our way, which just seems really counterintuitive. It's like, no, that's not fair. Here I am dedicated to the spiritual path. Why are there all these thorns in my way and stuff that I have to get out of the path? Well, it wouldn't be a good story if it was just an 8-lane highway all the way from here to realization. But the other part is that, yes, those things come, but the grace to work our way through them and around them, that grace also comes. And I've seen that time and time again. And I saw it yesterday with Jairam. I saw a soul who is in a difficult place and situation, and I saw the light of God shining through him. And we laughed and we told each other stories. It's the first time we had ever met each other in this lifetime. He felt like a brother. I sent the photo to a few people, and Asha responded this morning and said, 2 brothers. Just very sweet. But that sense of it's possible wherever we may find ourselves. And all of us have lived in ignorance at one time or another. If you go back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, sooner or later you're going to find some kind of ignorant consciousness back there. But all we have to do is awake to that light. I awake in thy light. I am joyful, I am free. I was singing that chant in German years ago. It was originally translated. And then some couple years ago when we were overseas, I saw that they had translated it differently. So I asked Kirtani, who's a whiz with German, why is it different now? And she said, well, it's a little different because the original translation, essentially, a kind of loose way of understanding it was, the light wakes me up. Whereas I awake in thy light, with the capital T, thy light means I awake in the light of God. I truly awake, not just awake from snoozing, but I awake in my consciousness in thy light. God's light is all around us, and it's all within us. And we are waiting to awaken from it, from whatever prison of consciousness we might have gotten ourselves stuck into. That light will burst the doors open, burst the walls down, burst through every kind of darkness into true joy and true happiness that cannot be colored or limited by any outward circumstance.